In my backyard, we have a koi pond. It's been kind of a never-ending project of mine and my wife's. Something we've put a lot of time, effort, and money into in the 3 years we've lived in our house. A few weeks ago, we decided to extend it some, and I finally got started on what needed to be done to do that last week. I started digging. After about 3 hours, I dug up a good amount of the area that I needed to, and I was about 4 feet down in this particular spot when I hit something. Whatever it was metal. I continued digging, looking for an edge of whatever this was, and I found it. I followed the edge around as I kept digging, and it turned out to be a square with a handle on top, with 2 hinges on the side. I pulled up on the handle, but I couldn't get it open. I figured it was a chest or a case of some kind, so I dug around the sides of it, but no matter how far I dug, it just kept going. I finally came to the conclusion that it was a hatch of some sort, perhaps a bomb shelter. When we bought the house, there had been no mention of a bomb shelter there, nor had there ever been a mention of it in the history of the house. I dug an area around the hatch so that I could easily get to the top. After a few hours, a night of sleep, and a few more hours the next day of blowtorches, drills, and hammers, I finally got the hatch open. As soon as I pulled the door off, I was hit with a wave of foul odor. The smell was stale and putrid, and was like a mixture of rotten eggs, spoiled milk, and a group of dead skunks. After taking a moment to catch my breath, I finally was able to hold it while I looked inside. There was a ladder that led downwards probably about 20 feet, and I could just barely make out a floor with the sunlight provided. I went to my garage and got a dust mask, hoping it would at least kind of mask the smell, and I grabbed a flashlight. I began my descent down the ladder while my wife stayed up top, curiously observing. The smell only worsened the further down I got, and the mask was doing next to nothing to offset it. I stopped several times on my way down, warding off the urge to vomit. Finally, I think I got used to it enough not to gag with every breath I took. I made it to the bottom, and there was a small corridor to the left, which was a large room. Just as I had suspected, it looked like a fallout shelter. There were 2 rows of shelving units that once had non-perishable foods, almost all of which were gone. I found a light switch on the wall next to me, which I turned on. To my surprise, 3 rows of lights lit up, allowing me to see the entire area. The room was large, likely taking up 2/3 of the square footage under my basement. There was a single twin bed with a nightstand next to it, on which was a handheld radio. There was a rug on the floor, on top of which was a small desk. On the desk there were multiple books, numerous notepads, and various other belongings. In one of the corners of the room there was a bucket that was clearly used for a toilet. How the contents of the bucket were removed from the hatch, I have no clue. There was a makeshift hanging rod attached to the walls, on which was a very, very old looking suit, and resting on top of it was a military helmet. I collected the loose contents of the shelter, the books, notepads, radio, helmet, etc., and placed them in a box that I found near the food racks. One odd thing I noticed was that there was no remnants from food products that were consumed. The place had obviously been used, as the bed was unkempt and the toilet had been utilized, but there was no area where the trash was kept. I didn't think too much of it at first. Now, I hadn't yet looked at what the notepads contained, but when I finally did take a look, I was thoroughly creeped out. All they said, for hundreds of pages, were the words "please let me out." Nothing else. Just those words written in different sizes over countless pages. Next, I did some research on the helmet. It was a standard issue United States Army helmet used during World War II. I don't understand what a US soldier would be doing in a fallout shelter in the Midwest during the Second World War. The next thing I found to be strange was that while most of the books were from the same period the helmet was from, 2 of them were printed in the late 2000s, and the radio was a model that was produced in 1999. Completely baffled, I returned to the shelter. I again descended the ladder. I decided to do a thorough inspection of the place, my hope being to gain any kind of insight as to who had been down there. I looked at the remaining food on the shelves, and all of it seemed to be from the World War II era. I looked for hidden doors, but found nothing. The walls were all perfectly solid, without a flaw to note. I sat down in the chair at the desk and opened the drawers, but found nothing. I examined the desk for anything that may have been etched to it, but the wood was next to flawless. It was only when I backed the chair up over the rug and took a step back that I realized the floor beneath me was hollow. I yelled up to my wife that I had found something. I moved the chair to the side and pushed the desk off of the rug. Then I slid the rug in the opposite direction of the desk, which revealed a trap door, which was being held closed by a master lock that was sat in a divot cut into the metal floor. I used a hammer and chisel, and after a short time I dismantled the padlock. I opened the hatch within the hatch and fell back after getting a glimpse of its contents. Beneath the trap door was the source of the smell. It was a decomposing body, one that looked as if it had only been there for a week or two. The area was just big enough to fit this man, who was positioned in a way I didn't even presume possible for a human. The only way I can describe him is folded up. I immediately called up to my wife to call 911 and got out of the hatch. The man was wearing clothes from the World War II era. In his pocket was a military ID, showing that he was born in 1921. Another pocket contained a Motorola Razr cell phone from 2007. His sidearm was a pistol that was produced in 1979. I found out later that the name on the military ID wasn't registered in any armed forces databases, and his social security number wasn't one that was distributed by the United States. Nobody by his name was ever reported missing in the history of the country. It was determined by investigators that the ground above the hatch door had remained untouched for decades, and it was confirmed that the door was in fact the only means of entering and exiting the shelter. The questions are obvious. Who was this man? How did he have technology from the future? How long was he in this shelter for? When did he die? Where did all his shit and piss and garbage go? How was he only a week or two decomposed? The strangest question to me, however, is who locked him under that trap door and moved the rug and desk back over it? For me, yesterday was Tuesday. The day before that was also Tuesday. The rest of today will be Tuesday, and tomorrow could be Tuesday too, but I won't know until I get there. It isn't hard to explain. You, like most people, experience every day once. There's a certain poetry in that, although most people don't see it. It means every day is your only shot. You don't get to try again because what you do has permanence, beautiful, unmistakable permanence. You have the certainty that what you do today will continue to be what you did today when you wake up tomorrow morning. That's a luxury I don't have. I've had my curse for a few years, though it was just a month ago that it began. It was a Monday in September. I woke up, it was raining outside, I ate a bowl of Cheerios, I showered and brushed my teeth. Then I went to school. I'm in high school, and I will be forever at this rate. My first class was Algebra 2 and God was it boring. I couldn't pay much attention to any of it. Then I had equally boring adventures in English, US history and physics. After that came lunch. I ate with my friend Samantha. I've known her for at least 2 years. Now she's only known me for 4 months, but I like to think that because I know her so well that she gets just as much out of our friendship. We were eating lunch in our school's library. We always eat there, it's our tradition. Her parents have been fighting a lot lately. She confided to me. Divorce was imminent. Honestly, it would be a sweet release. Those were her exact words. I nodded. Teenage boys never know what to say when it really matters. All I could do was look around at all the other kids in the library. Tryhards finishing assignments, nerds playing Magic the Gathering, quiet brains reading in the corner. We talked and ate until the bell rang. Then we both went to our separate classes. I had Spanish in my creative cooking class. Then the school day was over. There was track practice after school, but I decided to ditch it and go home instead. There was a dull pain developing in my stomach that made me think I was getting sick. When I got home, I flipped on the TV and watched for a few hours, every now and then checking the internet or doing homework. My parents didn't get home until later that evening. When they finally did, around 9 or 10 o'clock, we ate some reheated hamburgers and watched part of an episode of Dexter together. They were too tired to make it through the whole thing. Don't spend the entire night in front of the TV. Good night. After the episode ended, I went to bed. It didn't take long for me to fall asleep. The next morning, I woke up. The sound of rain tapping my window filled my ears. I ate a bowl of Cheerios, I showered and brushed my teeth, I went to school. Went to Algebra 2, and it was even more boring than the day before. I already knew all this stuff, why learn it again? Then I went to English, US history, and physics. Each one boring, repetitive, and pointless. I met Samantha in the library for lunch. Nothing new to report, I told her. School is as dull as ever. Then she told me about her parents. They had been fighting lately, and they were thinking about getting a divorce. Didn't you tell me this yesterday? I asked. No, I don't think so. I nodded. Obviously she had, but it wasn't the time to harp on her about her forgetfulness. I kind of hoped they get divorced. Honestly, it would be a sweet release. They haven't gotten along for years. A sweet release. That phrase sounded so familiar. I think you said that yesterday too. When? When we had lunch. What are you talking about? My gaze drifted from her to the people around us. A group of less popular kids playing Magic the Gathering. A boy who always talked too much in class putting the finishing touches on a paper. A small mousy girl reading in the corner by herself. All of them in the same place they had been the day before. Martin, are you okay? You're being weird. Samantha shook my shoulder. Everything seems so familiar. I told her I was fine and that I was having a strange day. Déjà vu, I said. We finished lunch together. I went to my remaining 3 classes. I had track practice, but I felt sick to my stomach, so I went home instead. My parents weren't there when I got home. I waited for them like I had the day before. When my parents came home, we had leftovers again. Hamburgers. We watched part of an episode of Dexter. We've seen this one. My mom shook her head. I don't remember it. My dad agreed with her. Netflix says that this was the next unplayed episode. They were too tired to finish watching. As they ascended the stairs to bed, my dad turned to tell me something. I knew what he was going to say. The words left my mouth first. Don't spend the entire night in front of the TV. Took the words right out of my mouth. Night, kiddo. The feeling of déjà vu blared in my mind. That day had been exactly the same as the day before. As I lay down in bed, I noticed my phone for the first time. Monday, September 19th. Panic set in. Had I dreamt my whole day ahead of time? Were my memories of the day fake? I tossed and turned in bed. I was quite worried. Eventually, exhaustion forced my frantic mind to sleep. The next day was the same. And the next. Same conversation about divorce with Samantha. Same boring classes. Same half episode of Dexter with my parents. I thought the same thing that anyone else would be thinking. Somehow I'd ended up in a low-budget version of the movie Groundhog Day. For 5 days this went on. It was funny. On the evening of the 5th consecutive Monday, shortly before I fell asleep, I promised myself that if tomorrow was the exact same, I was going to go to a hospital and have them figure out what was wrong with me. But on day 6, everything was different. We were out of Cheerios. My classes taught different lessons and Samantha didn't show up to school. My phone finally stopped reading Monday the 19th and instead read Tuesday the 20th. I've never felt relief like that before. That was until the next day. The Cheerio box remained empty. Samantha was gone and my phone broke the same horrible news to me as the day before. It was Tuesday the 20th. The next 7 consecutive days were Tuesday the 20th. With every repeated day, I feared that I had fallen into some sort of a time loop. But on what would have been the 9th Tuesday, it became Wednesday. Wednesday repeated 4 times. Thursday repeated 3 times. Friday repeated 9 times, and so on and so on. Most days repeat somewhere between 3 and 6 times. Every day resets back to the moment when I woke up. Sometimes I change the things I do. I turn left instead of right when I know there'll be a car accident up ahead. I avoid people who are going to be in bad moods. I skip watching TV because I know what each character is going to say in each scene. Here's the thing, only the last day takes. So if I repeated a Monday 4 times, and on the 3rd instance of that Monday I wrecked my car, but I didn't wreck it on the 4th Monday, then I wouldn't have a wrecked car when it became Tuesday. I know what you're thinking, that's a silver lining, right? I can do anything I want to anyone and it doesn't matter because it will all be erased at midnight. But there's a problem. I can never tell when a day is going to be the last occurrence of that day. The most I've ever had a day repeat itself is 17 times. That was the day my grandmother died. I was in the room with her, just the two of us, every time. We were in the hospital, where she was recovering from a bout of pneumonia. Her frame was bathed in the sterile hospital lights. The hunched figure underneath those sheets looked more like a ghost than my grandmother. She was looking at me. Her mouth opened and she started to say something, but then all of a sudden she let out this god-awful scream. It froze my blood, and then she was gone. Heart failure. No one could have seen it coming. I tried warning the doctors, but they were never able to stop it. After a while, I just started letting it happen, savoring every moment I had with her before she was gone. When one of our loved one dies, you get to walk away from it knowing that it's over. But I had to relive her death over and over. 17 times I watched the life get ripped out of her body. It never got any easier. There's a little bit of a pattern to when the days repeat themselves. I found that on the difficult days, the traumatic, stressful days when you're just begging the universe to move on and let that day end, they're the ones that repeat themselves the most. Every horror I face, whether emotional or physical, I face over and over. Sometimes it's like being in hell. Thus far, I haven't had a reason to tell anyone about this. I mean, they'll just think I'm crazy. I don't appear to be aging any quicker, and although it can get boring sometimes, I've kinda grown accustomed to the repetition. Plus, I'd be remiss to not mention the benefits. My grades have gotten better because I always see the test answers before. I can make a little money betting on football, and I usually get a redo when I say something stupid to a girl. It's harder to change big things because I only get to repeat one day at a time, so I haven't saved anybody's life or anything. Until today, I never seriously considered telling anyone about this. But I think I have to now. Today is the 9th consecutive Tuesday, the 18th, that I've been through. It might be the last Tuesday, or maybe it won't be. I need to tell someone about what happens because no matter how hard I try, I can't find any way to prevent it. Here's how the day will go. I wake up in the window seat of an airplane. Outside, all I can see is the ocean and a darkened sky. My phone reads 4 a.m. wherever I am. My family is on a red-eye to Japan. Our dream vacation. My mother is sitting next to me and I decide to let her sleep for a while. I turn on the little computer screen on the seat in front of me. We still have 7 hours to go on our flight. I read for a while from a book that I bought on the flight. Then I doze on and off for a while. Around 6 a.m., everyone I can see on the flight is still asleep. Except for this big guy sitting a couple rows in front of me. He's a heavy-set man in a white business shirt and grey slacks. Looks like a real mess of a guy. Balding, dirty, you know the type. At 6:13, he unbuckles his seatbelt and he stands up. He fills the entire aisle and some of the seat next to him. His head just barely reaches the ceiling. The heavy-set man puts a hand in the pocket of his slacks and pulls out something black. Then there is yelling. First from the man, and then from the people on the plane who are waking up. Everybody stay where you are. Who are you? What are you doing? Shut up. Everybody is going to stay in their seats and be quiet. I can see the other men standing up further down in the airplane. They all have guns. These men are all dressed the same. They're all middle-aged and dirty looking. They're hijackers. Many passengers are crying. There's a delirious woman in the row behind me who is hyperventilating and won't stop screaming. The heavy-set man walks over to her. Shut the fuck up. Please don't hurt us. I said shut up. Why are you doing... There is a ringing in my ears, and my vision blurs. Little droplets of red have covered the walls above the surrounding seats. Screams erupt from all sides of me. A baby starts crying somewhere near the back of the plane. That's what happens if you talk, so everybody keep your goddamn mouths shut. My mother grabs me tightly and the men keep their guns trained on us. There must be at least 10 of them. Nobody moves an inch. Near the front of the plane I hear 2 gunshots. Then I feel my stomach lurch forward. The window shows an ocean that has been perfectly flat. It's diagonal now and it's growing larger every second. The crash lasts for only a second. Down the aisle I see the plane disintegrate as it strikes the water. My last memory is my mother's face being torn from her skull, just as the words "I love you" disappear from her lips. Everything goes dark, and my ears start ringing. Then I wake up. It's 4 a.m. I'm on a red-eye flight to Japan with my family, and I have 2 hours to live. The second time this happened, I tried to warn the pilots. They wouldn't listen to me. The third time I tried to warn the other passengers. One of the hijackers stood up and fired his gun at me before I could even finish telling them. Immediately afterwards, I woke up. I was still in my window seat and the fourth repeat of this day was beginning all around me. There was no chance of me trying to stop the hijackers. There were simply too many of them. I've told the flight attendants, I've told my mom, I've done everything I could. Strangely enough, people don't believe you when you say a bunch of middle-aged men will crash your plane in 2 hours. There's in-plane Wi-Fi. Around the 5th time I woke up, I snuck my mum's credit card out of her purse to pay for it. I've tried contacting the government, the TSA, air control, everything you can think of. The hijackers always win. There's too many of them and too little time to warn everyone else. I'm not sure how many times this day will repeat itself. Maybe tomorrow I'll wake up and it will be Tuesday again, or maybe I won't wake up at all. This is the second time I've set this message to upload. The first time didn't take. I want to say a few things in case this reaches anyone I know. To my family, I love you. You were always there for me no matter what. To my friends, thank you for putting up with me all these years. You've made life worth it. Especially Samantha. Samantha, if you get a chance to read this, I've always had a crush on you. Even with the thousands of repeated days, I never knew how to tell you until now. I'm sorry that I waited so long. It's almost time for the hijackers to start, so I better go. In case you haven't figured this out, if you're reading this, that means this time took. It means I'm already gone. I explored the shadow web once. Getting there was difficult. All the programs that let you run around on the web anonymously have rather confusing installation instructions, and I'm not the tech-savviest type, so it was a struggle. But after a few frustrating hours, I managed to do it. My first stop was, no doubt, the hidden wiki. You hear about it all the time, and it really makes you curious to see it for yourself. People talk about how sick it is, how you need to be extremely careful of what you click, and they're 100% right. I avoided so much, but still would wind up seeing an image or an article I really hadn't wanted to see. Things that no one should see. Disgusting, pure, evil things that shouldn't even exist in the first place. I've been on the shadow web for 10 minutes and was already expecting the FBI to pound on my door. But here my only crime was curiosity. Weird comparison, I know, but the shadow web is kinda like doing drugs. You're alarmingly paranoid at first, constantly questioning your actions. Hell, my friend called me while I was on it, and I almost had a heart attack because I was so sure that it was the police. But after a while, you sort of relax a little bit, feel more confident. After a few days of being the most cautious I've ever been in my life, I started feeling more adventurous. Started clicking links and exploring interesting looking sites. Human experiments, killers for hire, black market sites. Seems weird to explore these sites, I know, but the sites were so cheesy half of the time. It's hard to believe that any could be real. You can find half these websites on the normal web as well. They're pretty much always fake. I completely avoided porn links. There are so many sick sites featuring minors. The shadow web is where pedophiles get their endless supply of child pornography. Even porn sites claiming to feature only people 18 plus, I simply didn't risk. I didn't risk most of the snuff films either, though I admit I did watch a video or two, purely out of curiosity, which was my worst decision ever. It's when several weeks of regular shadow web access had passed that I finally began to feel extremely confident. I gotten to the point where I could easily and automatically avoid links I knew led to bad things. I had already explored a few seriously gruesome sites with no police visits. I was cocky. I was curious. So I joined a forum. It was a pretty tame forum compared to the others I'd stumbled across anyway. This one was for, as they called themselves, underground families. Literally, it was a ton of people who lived underground or in completely isolated areas with their families, all over the world. And they weren't like the backwoods inbred families you see in horror movies, or giant religious communities. Most of the families were pretty small, usually just living in some warehouse or a basement, or just a normal house. What brought them together was that they never left their homes, ever. They were living completely secluded lives, only socializing with their own family and the people on this forum. There was no talk of torture or human trafficking or kidnapping or anything of the sort. No murder or inbreeding. Seriously, they appeared to be totally normal families who, honest to God, just wanted to live alone. Stay off the grid, so to speak. Really, not at all that weird or uncommon. I joined the forum purely to access all of the topics. I wasn't planning on talking to anyone. But one user did catch my eye. He seemed to be extremely popular on the site. He had posted several threads, and had way more thread views and replies than most of the others. He replied to everyone, even silly remarks you'd think would have gotten lost in such heavily populated threads. Not wanting to bring attention to myself, I messaged him privately. "Hi, sorry to message you out of the blue like this, but I'm new to the forum and didn't feel totally comfortable posting yet. I'm trying to write an unbiased article for online publication about underground families, and was hoping you could tell me more about your life. I'm ultimately hoping to give public insight about family life in seclusion, compared to, say, one person who lives alone. I'm also interested in the reason behind your family's decision to live underground. If you're interested and willing to offer your views, I have several questions ready. There's absolutely no obligation to answer any of the questions you don't like or don't feel comfortable answering, and none of them are personal towards you specifically or would reveal your identity. Thank you." So I had lied about the article thing, but I had a gut feeling that if I tried to talk to him pretending to be a member of an underground family myself, he'd call me out immediately. You can't just read a couple of posts about something you've never heard of before and then blend into their community seamlessly. Besides, this way I could ask all the questions I wanted to without any fault. My motive was presented up front. He could either say yes or no. No harm done either way. Several days passed with no response, so I stopped lurking on the forum as often. After a while, I only checked it once every couple of days. Eventually a week passed and I'd basically moved on altogether. The second week after sending that message, I did get curious again, so I went back to the forum, but it was gone. The entire thing was gone. Did I have the right web address? Yeah, it was definitely the same. So where was it? The site wasn't just taken down or anything. The entire page was disabled. You just get an error message. This site doesn't exist. What? Was it because of my message? Did he report it? Did the owners get spooked and the whole place get deleted? There wasn't even anything bad on that forum. Why would they react so seriously to one message? They were on the shadow web, all presumably browsing completely anonymously like I was. Surely I couldn't have been the first curious person to find it and ask questions. I started digging around on the shadow web. A whole community wouldn't just delete themselves. They create a new site, right? I did find a couple of websites describing the underground family lifestyle, but no forums. They seriously deleted the whole thing. Maybe a new one was being created as I searched. I decided I'd wait a week, and then search again. Give them some time to rebuild if they even plan to. As I waited, I grew bored. The shadow web is virtually endless, but to avoid any confrontations with the FBI, the sites you feel comfortable visiting are extremely limited. The normal web would never satisfy me again. I was able to tell that the first day I used the shadow web. But by now, I'd gone through all the tamer websites I could find. I just wanted more interesting stuff. I was just curious. I wanted shock value. So I began digging a little deeper, visiting more iffy sites. Still avoided all the porn to the best of my ability, but I did wind up on some seriously nasty pages. I found one site that sold small objects made out of human skin. Actually seemed relatively legit as well, so obviously I didn't stay long on that one. I found another site that sold old cyanide capsules and other drugs and guns. I even came across a site where people filmed their suicide live, and users could pay to watch. It even went so far as to hold contests. Suicidal, as they were called, would, live on camera, present several options for killing themselves, and paying users could vote on which method was ultimately used. Of course, the information was all written in the site's FAQ. I wasn't going to pay to watch a suicide, so I have no idea if this was legit or not. The week finally came and went, so I searched again for the Underground Families forum, and again, no luck. Apparently they really had deleted it, or just hidden it way better. I was about to give up on the shadow web, when my eye spotted a site called Road to Nowhere. I had actually seen this name when doing my original search, but I hadn't clicked onto it. I did so this time. It was a website, not a forum, but it had a familiar theme. It showed pictures of families hanging out in places that appeared to be furnished basements or rooms with cement floors. The pictures were usually a little dark, often kind of grainy, but the families seemed happy and close. Most of the people and kids in the pictures were smiling and talking, and not like cheesy stock photos, but like actual candid pictures. Maybe some of them hadn't even known their pictures were being taken. I explored around, and it turned out that the site wasn't quite like the forum, but more like a dating service of sort. Except instead of finding dates, you found families to join. Families posted pages advertising themselves. They described their appearances, size of the family, how big their home was, their religion, goals, hobbies, interests, etc. Then they'd say exactly what they were looking for. And when I say exactly, I mean exactly. For example, they'd ask for prominent cheekbones, or you must be 5'10", even sometimes going so far to say things like you must have a deep, soothing voice, perfect for telling bedtime stories but also for effectively scolding. They meant business. A lot of them said that if you didn't have every single characteristic they were looking for, don't even bother replying. It was pretty strange, to say the least. I was digging deeper, even more intrigued. And then, by an accident, I found a hidden link. It was the full stop at the end of the third sentence on one of the family's listings. Why there, I don't know. Maybe the link changed daily to a different random full stop somewhere else on the site. Either way, I clicked it and was taken to a new section of the site. A forum. Except this forum wasn't anything like the first one. This forum didn't have happy families joking and bonding with each other. This forum was serious, dark in tone, blunt in its cause. The website was for families looking to welcome a new adult to their home. The forum was for families looking to welcome new children. There were only 2 sections in the forum, one for families seeking children, and one for families advertising their children. One thread in the section was titled "Third Was Fake." It was by a woman, apparently single. She'd already taken in 2 kids, and had mistakenly decided to take in a third, and it just wasn't working out, as she said. She stated that she hadn't realized the third, a 4-year-old boy, had had his hair dyed black by the previous family, who I guess had given him up because he cried more than their other child. None of this made sense to me, but looking through her thread, it was filled mainly with sympathy posts. I kept scrolling. Each reply was worse than the last. People sympathized with her struggles, but she wasn't getting any takers for the boy. One user commented saying how difficult it is finding families for children over 2 years old. From the other posts, I learned that crying children can rarely be rehomed because apparently crying is one of the many negative child traits underground families don't want. Others include large feet, narrow mouths, and bony limbs. Between the website and the forum, it suddenly dawned on me why everyone had listed such strict traits and qualifications. They all wanted their families to appear biologically related, right down to the temperament and personality. Maybe for some other, much sicker reasons as well. I went back to reading the replies. I was getting to the more recent posts, like in the last week or so. It was obvious that the woman was growing increasingly frustrated with her lack of luck. Finally, she posted a time limit. If no one takes him by August 3rd, I am going to dispose of him. Today was August 1st. A few people replied with things like, "Aw, poor little guy. But you have to do what you have to do." No one seemed concerned for the boy at all. They only seemed sympathetic towards the mom. So I did something I never, ever should have done. I messaged her, privately, as with the man on the last forum. I told her I'd take the boy. I was not expecting a reply. Hell, I half expected the site to suddenly shut down like before. So imagine my shock when, not even 15 minutes later, I got a message back. "Oh, thank God, disposing is such a mess, and my other kids haven't witnessed one yet. Tell me about your family." Short and to the point. It seemed most of the posts were written like this. Short, precise, and to the point. I tried my best to reply in the same manner, making up a family on the spot and praying she didn't ask too many more questions. I'm a married mother of 1. Our daughter is 6. The The boy looks like he could be her twin. We've discussed, and we are willing to try and appease his crying habit. I had seen the word appease thrown around on both this forum and the last one, and I had a feeling it referred to something a lot more sinister than it sounded. The woman responded back with an email address I could reach her at, an anonymous one of course, to discuss the finer details and eventually an exchange location. I agreed and promised her a prompt response. Then I sat at my desk for a moment, thinking what on earth had I just done? Do I call the police? If I show them all of this, would they forgive the fact that I've been browsing sick and twisted sites on the shadow web for the past month and a half? Or will trying to be a hero for this little boy wind me up in prison? I was scared. Extremely scared. Terrified of being exposed. This would definitely make national headlines, maybe even international ones. Everyone in the world would say, yeah, she saved a boy, but what was she doing on all those other sites? My friends and family would know I watched that 2-minute video of some Indian man being beheaded with a hunting knife. They'd know about the live torture site that I hung out on for 2 hours. I hadn't watched any of the videos. They were paid to watch anyway, and even if they weren't, I still wouldn't have. Right? No, maybe I would have. My curiosity had landed me in hot, unforgiving waters, and given me a black and white choice as punishment. Save the boy, but face public humiliation and possible prison time for my sick curiosities. Or delete anonymous browsing altogether, never look back, and convince myself the boy's fate was out of my hands. Top story. 4-year-old found dead after anonymous call to police. A woman's anonymous phone call to police headquarters at around 4:30 p.m. last Friday may have resulted in the death of a young boy, thought to be a victim of a large-scale underground child trafficking trade. Tom has the story. Thank you, Beth. An investigation of a 4-year-old's discovered body now shows that the boy is the same child who was kidnapped from a daycare 3 years ago, a crime that had left such mystery and sorrow in its wake that the daycare had been forced to shut down just weeks after the incident occurred. Hope of locating the boy was slim, until recently an anonymous phone call to the Rosendale Police Department came in last Friday afternoon. Here's the call. 911, what's your emergency? I think a boy is about to be killed. What? Tell me where you are. No, I can't. Okay, listen, I was on this website. What website? A website for families, underground families, where they kidnap children and... Look, I think... Ma'am, please slow down. What is this website's URL address? Where are you? Look, a woman is taking a boy to this area. He was kidnapped. She kidnapped him. If you don't go to get him, she's going to kill him. She's going to kill him at 5 o'clock if you don't go to get him. Ma'am, hello? Upon further investigation, it is believed that the boy was being traded through an underground child trafficking ring, but the details are still being worked out. The name and whereabouts of the anonymous caller are currently unknown, but police believe the call was made from a payphone just down the street from where the body was found. The police are unsure if the caller was part of the trade. An alert was called and responding officers were immediately sent to the location provided. They arrived a little before 5 p.m. and waited, but no woman or child showed. The next day, on August 3rd, they returned to the spot for a follow-up and discovered the deceased body of the 4-year-old left in a nearby dumpster. Causes of death have not been officially released, but investigators suspect that it may have been strangulation. The boy otherwise showed no signs of trauma or abuse. No clues to his killer were left, and investigators are still working to determine where he's been over the past 3 years since his disappearance. Back to you, Beth. Thanks, Tom. Absolutely tragic. Yes, it is. In other news...
When I was a kid, I had this recurring nightmare that always preceded the death of a loved one. It wasn't quite a premonition. I didn't know who was going to die, how they would die, or when. Only that it would be within the next few days to a week. I had the dream a few times before I figured out the link between the dream and the deaths. Now, these were ordinary deaths. Elderly relatives, my grandfather's terminal cancer, my aunt who lost a child during preterm labor. I grieved for each lost loved one. The dream was short. It took place in this massive white room, so big that I couldn't see the walls. Maybe there weren't any walls. It was like I was looking through a rip in reality. More like I was seeing behind the fabric of the reality we live in, seeing the machine that operates our universe. I say machine because it felt so cold, so mechanical. In the vast nothingness of all white, I would see this gray, not quite steel cable extending as far as the eye could see. On the cable was a massive black sphere. No light reflected off of this sphere. In this too bright white plane, the sphere was impossibly dark, as if it absorbed any light. The sphere would move swiftly along this cable until suddenly the rest of the cable would just vanish and the sphere would stop instantly without any slowing. Then a wall would appear, a too bright white wall that was indistinguishable from the rest of the too bright whiteness, but I would know that it was there. On the wall, a name was printed. At least, I always assumed it was a name. I could never picture it after I woke up. This wall would only stay up for a split second, but it was an eternity. Everything around me would evaporate, and I'd have this feeling in my entire body that was a combination of pure weightlessness, the feeling you get when you're about to fall, and utter consuming dread. In that split second, someone ended. This was an absolute ending. There is no afterlife, no heaven or hell, after the certainty of this mechanism. I would wake up gasping, crying, completely disoriented. The first time I remember having this dream was when I was 7, although it was already familiar to me then, so I'm sure I was even younger when it first started. I was raised Catholic and was actually a pretty religious kid, but this dream was the antithesis of my entire religion. I tried to ignore it at first, tried to forget about it. I had the dream a couple more times after that. When I was 9, I had it 3 nights in a row. Then, my great-grandma passed away, and the night was dream-free. I realized what it meant and tried talking to my parents about it. They chalked it up to grief and an overactive imagination. I tried talking to the school counselor about it. She talked to my parents. My parents were going through a rough patch, made worse by having to foster and provide for 3 of my cousins, plus my brother and I. I overheard things like seeking attention, acting out. Maybe she got it from one of her books. Needs more socialization. I tried talking to our church's priest about it too, who seemed very skeptical and just told me to have faith in God and pray more. After that, I learned my lesson and stopped talking about it. The dream came again when I was 10, and I guessed, correctly, that it was my grandfather, who'd been ill for some time with terminal brain cancer. I convinced my dad that they should go see him that weekend. He lived a couple hours away from us with his wife. My grandpa passed the night after they arrived. I tried researching the dream, but unlike the movies, neither our school library nor our public library had many books about premonitions, the afterlife, well, aside from biblical texts, or anything supernatural. The internet wasn't helpful either. This was in the 90s, and not surprisingly, it's hard to come up with relevant results for something like Big Black Ball, Precognitive Dream Death. I did pick up dream interpretation as a hobby, and because of all the time I've spent digging into dream symbols, I'm actually pretty good at interpreting people's dreams. I had the dream again when I was 11, great-grandma, then again when I was 13. This time, the dream started nightly on September 4th, 2011. By the next week, I was very paranoid and freaking my parents out, mostly because I kept urging them to be careful and telling them that I loved them approximately 100 times per day. They kept asking what was wrong, but I didn't think they'd believe me, so I didn't tell them. September 11th, 2001 happened, and I didn't have the dream that night. I didn't lose anyone close to me in the attacks, but it was a tragedy felt by the whole nation. The next day, my mom asked me why I had been so weird all week, and I told her that I had a dream, and that I knew something bad was going to happen, but I didn't know who it was going to happen to or when. She didn't say anything after that, but I got the feeling that she believed me and was a little scared of it. I was just shy of my 14th birthday when the dream started coming again. I also had the flu and was running a fever, so I'm not sure if that affected me and made me a little delusional, but I spent about a week feeling like I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or not, even though I was awake. 2 nights before my birthday, my fever peaked and I went to bed early. The dreams were intense, alternating between my recurring dream and other creepy black and white dreams that I've never been able to remember. What I do remember is sleepwalking. I've always been a sleep talker, but this is the only time I've ever sleepwalked. And I have lucid dreams quite often where I'm able to change the dream that I'm in and remember it. But this was completely different. I wasn't in control of myself. I knew I was dreaming, but I was trapped inside myself, a spectator, helplessly watching as I walked around. My house was different too. The blinds and curtains were gone from the windows, and instead of the street lamps and lawns outside, there was just black. A flash of light, similar to lightning, would go off and light up the blackness for a split second, but there was no ground, nothing to light up. The inside of the house was stripped bare, down to just beds. No other furniture, no clothing, toys, towels, or anything else that you would normally see lying around a house. Everything was black and white, except the people, my family. I walked around in my sleep, not in control, but fully aware of what was going on, checking on all of my family members to see if they were alive. Once I had checked on all of them, I looked out this big window at the landing of the stairs, and when the lightning-like flash went off, I glimpsed the familiar cable and giant sphere in the distance. I felt this cold, unforgiving, omnipotent presence behind me, at the bottom of the stairs. And I knew that I had been found. Something new that I had seen behind the curtain, had seen the mechanics operating our world, and it was here to fix that problem. I turned to face it. The next thing I knew, it was morning. The sun was shining through the blinds of my bedroom window. The birds were chirping outside. I'm not being dramatic. I remember this part very clearly. And I was lying in bed. I felt great. My fever was gone, and the flu that had had me in bed for a week had disappeared overnight. It was a beautiful morning, the stuff of fairy tales, minus the singing birds and animals that help with chores. And I was utterly confused by it, because it seemed like a second ago I'd nearly been face to face with something that didn't want me peeking behind that rip in reality. I was still filled with such dread, and I rushed downstairs to find my mom and ask if everyone was okay. Now that I think about it, I should probably apologize to my mom for that morning, because I'm sure I scared the hell out of her. The day before, I was so sick that I couldn't keep any food down, and I had to alternate Tylenol and ibuprofen just to keep my fever below 104. Then that morning, I was running around, looking much better, except I was obviously scared and asking if everyone was okay. Everyone was fine. Everything was fine. But someone was still going to die. I had no idea who. I spent the day frustrated and scared because I was powerless to stop whatever was going to happen. And even though that presence was gone, there's not really a guarantee when it comes to forces that are far beyond mortal comprehension. I tried not to think about the sleepwalking. I was in no way ready to begin to wonder what happened there. No dreams that night. I slept great, but I awoke with a heavy heart because I knew what it meant. It was my birthday, but I wasn't celebrating. Around 5 p.m. that day, my mom came into my room and sat on my bed next to me. She was trying to hold back sobs as she told me a friend of mine was in his parents' van with his dad driving, his mom in the front seat, and his sister sitting next to him, heading into town the night before. For some reason, I think maybe an animal ran into the road, the van swerved and went off the side of the road, flipped upside down, and landed in the river. Several hours later, someone was driving by and saw frost on a tire that was barely sticking out of the water and called it in. The family had all drowned. It took me years to find an uneasy peace with what had happened. I felt such guilt, like I could have prevented it, like I could have stopped any of it. Losing my friend and his family was devastating to me. They were wonderful people, and although my friend and I were young, we could have been more than just friends, eventually. I never had the dream again. I've tried again and again to make some sense out of it, but I've never really found anything close to what I experienced. I know I didn't cause any of these deaths, that I was just someone who, either by chance or for an unknown reason, saw through this immersive illusion we call reality and got a glimpse into the mechanism behind it. I don't feel like I was punished by the presence I felt. I think it simply closed up that rift that I was seeing through. I still don't understand any of it. I don't think we're able to understand. We just aren't meant to.
Let me first start off by saying that on behalf of my dying father and the rest of our family, we are sorry. We are sorry for not handling things differently and possibly putting all of your lives in danger. Let me start from the beginning. My dad and I had just finished Thanksgiving dinner last afternoon at around 2 p.m. All of the family had left, and my sister and mother went out shopping. So, my dad and I, alone in the house, decided to start getting the Christmas decorations in motion in hopes that we could be done with them by the end of the week. We marched up to the 3rd floor of our house and over to the attic opening. My dad walked up the ladder and began to hand me some boxes. After about 2 minutes of moving these, I heard my dad say, "What the?" Then, I heard a blood-curdling scream. I climbed up the ladder as quickly as possible and saw a huge rat scurry into the darkness. Now when I say huge, I mean like 2 feet long and about 8 or 9 inches tall. This thing was the size of a fucking dog. I know it was a rat. I've handled rats in the past and I know one when I see it. It was a rat, just a really big one. Visibly shaken because of what I had just seen, I turned over to my father, who was clutching at his forearm with blood spewing everywhere. I hurried over to him and helped him down the stairs, being careful not to touch any blood. My initial thought was rabies, and that disease isn't transmitted via blood, but something about that rat made me more cautious of helping my father. He told me to walk him to the bathroom so he could clean the wound. I brought him over some alcohol and some cotton swabs while notifying him how much this was about to hurt. He said he knew, and I asked, "Are you sure we shouldn't go to the hospital?" He assured me it was okay and decided to apply the alcohol himself. The scream he let out was worse than when he had gotten bit. He suffered through it though and draped his unbitten arm over my shoulder as I helped him hobble to his bed. It didn't take but a minute for him to pass out on that mattress. I was still in the room, just staring at him, trying to grasp what had just happened. Less than an hour ago, we were all eating gravy-covered turkey and laughing about old memories with one another, and now I had just helped my father limp into his bed. It was surreal. The amount of blood at the scene. I knew we should have gone to the hospital. So, when he fell asleep, I called my mom and told her about the situation. She said she would head home immediately and take care of it. 20 minutes later, I heard the front door slam open as my frantic mother ran up the stairs. I had a problem looking at blood for too long, so I just sat outside and waited for her to come home. When she finally arrived, we walked in together to check on my father. And in that 20-minute time period, he went from looking like he got badly cut by a kitchen knife to an Ebola patient. And I don't use that analogy loosely. He actually looked like he was very near death. White bumps all over his face, motionless body. I was horrified. My mother helped me walk him to the car. As a family, we all drove to the hospital. About an hour had passed since the initial bite, and the hospital was in sight. Then we began to hear a moaning sound from my father in the back seat. My sister leaned over to see what he was trying to say, and just like in those horror movies, he bit her on the neck. Only this bite was different than the one you would see in the movies. This was much, much more vicious. Half of my sister's neck departed with that fatal bite, and immediately she fell to the bottom of the car, motionless. My mother screamed as I sat silent in shock, and she swerved into the hospital parking lot. She slammed on the brakes, and we both ran out towards the entrance. Some hospital staff ran out to meet us and asked what all the commotion was about. My mother tried to explain to them the situation, but she couldn't get it out between her vicious tears. I was still in shock, but I was able to tell them that the people who needed help were in the car, and that my father had gotten bit by a rat. Moments later, about 5 doctors ran out to the car and pulled my father and sister out in a stretcher. My mother and I both received medical attention because of the trauma we had just experienced, and while we were being checked on the first floor, we saw 2 SWAT cars pull up to the hospital. They ran in a unified line to the elevator, and more cops, SWAT, and even CDC cars pulled up to secure the perimeter of the hospital. My mother eventually went to the 5th floor where my father and sister were to check on them, and I was still on the 1st floor. About 20 minutes ago, they drilled every single exit of the building completely shut and have guns pointed at the windows. They said anyone who tries to escape would be fired upon. I tried to get to the 5th floor, but the elevator was shut down. I began to frantically ask every doctor I could find about the situation, and no one had any clue what was happening. Eventually, I found a doctor being looked at by other doctors on the 1st floor. I recognized him because he was one of the doctors that ran out to the car when we first arrived. He looked exactly like my father did when my mother and I checked on him. I tried to knock on the door and ask the nurses to let me talk to the doctor, but they just shut the blinds and shooed me away. I am worried for my family, and I am worried for the 40 or so innocent people who were in the lobby with me when they locked the doors. I am worried for the medical staff at the hospital, and I am worried that whatever my dad caught from that rat might spread to the outside world. We have been in this hospital for a day now, and there is still no word. Last night we heard a ton of screaming from the room where that doctor was getting looked at, but no one can see anything because the blinds are still closed. I will try and update soon, hopefully. I'm in foster care, and I recently moved into a nicer neighborhood with big houses and not a lot of traffic. My room is in the basement of the house, and my view is into the backyard. I'm an insomniac, so I'm always up way later than the couple I live with. It was late at night, around 3 a.m, so it was very dark outside, and I was in my room, playing the night away on my guitar. A little lamp was on, and I had a window cracked open. I'm not an anxious guy, but for some reason I felt like something was off, like I was being watched. At first, I brushed it off, because the motion-activated light hadn't turned on, and I couldn't see anything or anyone in the thick darkness outside. At some point, I stopped playing and went to take a piss, and as I came back into my room, I noticed that it was way cooler than when I left. Again, I brushed it off, until I saw that my window had been pushed open. There's a security chain on my window, but in my sleep-deprived idiocy, I just wrote it off as my cat coming inside to eat while I went to the bathroom. Before I moved in where I live now, I lived in a seedy, high-crime area, so I'm always hyper alert at night. I went to take a look just to be safe, and that's when I saw it. There was a person a few meters from my open window. Now, I'm not a big guy, but I've been in a fair share of fistfights and physical arguments, so I wasn't really worried about him fucking me up. He obviously knew I'd spotted him, as he had eye contact before I sprinted for the window. I got there a little before him, but he somehow managed to get his fingers inside before I slammed the window down on them with all my might, hearing a horrible crack as the heavy window hit his hand. He didn't try to retract his hand or say anything at first, but when I cracked it open to do it again, he quickly pulled away and yelped in pain. I secured the windows, and he stood there with his bleeding hand held close to his body with his eyes firmly locked with mine for 10 seconds or so, before he ran off in the direction of the front of the house. I ran upstairs as quickly as I could, but he was nowhere to be seen. I woke up the couple, but not before I checked all the windows and doors, and they called the police while I checked everything again and turned on the lights in the house. The police took swabs of the blood on the window frame, but it didn't match anything in their system. No one went to any hospital in an 100-kilometer radius with matching injuries in the following 5 days. So to this day, I don't know who the fuck tried to break in, or had intentions worse than that, and I also don't know if he's still around. The thing that bothers me the most is that he didn't run away when I first spotted him, and I don't know how long he'd been out there, lurking, spying on me in the darkness. So, creepy garden lurking guy, let's not meet again.
I was a paranormal investigator, but a few months ago, I realized how I wasn't making any progress. So, I quit. You know those old people in libraries telling stories to young children? Well, in most towns, you have to volunteer to do that. You don't get paid. But in my town, I do get paid. That's my new job. I tell scary stories that I have experienced. Well, not all the stories I tell are those that I've experienced. Some are others' experiences. And also, let me tell you, the ones about me are real. Absolutely real. The other ones, I'm not so sure. Those stories are all from my friends. Most of the times they're honest, but you never know. Anyway, let's start. It was back when I wanted to become a doctor. I had no experience in a hospital whatsoever, so I decided to go to the Experience Being a Nurse campaign. Back then, I was curious on why they had chosen the oldest hospital in my town. You know what I'm talking about, right? Hospitals are odd places. They're also sad places. A nurse's job is to comfort a patient. I didn't know this before the campaign, but patients are pretty lonely when they're stuck there for a while. Of course their families come to visit once in a while, but that's only like once a week. Hospital parking is expensive. So the nurses go and talk to the patients while they're laying in bed. That makes the patient really happy, having someone to talk to, and have that person actually listen to you. And for the nurses, they're happy too. They get to know what the person is actually like. There's always a chance of becoming good friends too. But that isn't how hospitals always work. After getting to know a patient, some of them pass away. So all of the work gets thrown out the window. You are always overcome by the glum feelings in your brain. But you can't act like this forever. There are other patients looking for someone to talk to. That's how hard it is to be a nurse. I thought being a nurse was much easier than being a doctor. Well, maybe education-wise it is. But you know, from what I just explained, it might not be that easy. I felt queasy when I first entered the hospital doors. The door slid open with a squeak, indicating that the door was quite old. I explained to the woman behind the counter what I was there for. She smiled and led me back to a room where another woman was waiting for me. She examined me with her strict eyes and briskly stood up. She stuck up her hand at my waist. "Hi, I'll be leading you today." She said her name was Norris. As she showed me around the hospital, time passed quickly. It was past dinner time when we finished. I realized that there was a problem. "Wait, I was supposed to actually be a nurse today, right? Not just get shown around?" "Yes, exactly. You're on night duty." Night duty. The time when all the ghosts, demons, and stuff come and haunt the hospital. After explaining how the nurse's station worked, she left me standing alone with a post-it note that had her phone number scribbled on it. With a sigh, I slumped down onto the leather chair that was encompassed by several flashing lights and buttons. I pulled out a book that I had been reading since 2 days ago and read. In a matter of minutes, I had fallen asleep. I woke up when the nurse call light flashed into my face. Startled, I fell onto the floor and stretched my neck up to see what room needed my service. 207. Room 207. I hurriedly scurried down the hallways. Room 207 was on the east building, very far away from the nurse's station. My shoes made quiet sounds that echoed around the dark hallway. My flashlight got dimmer with every step. I climbed up a flight of stairs, careful not to slip. Finally, I reached room 207. I opened the door and got greeted by a dim light near the patient's bed. She was shivering badly. She said her name was Lauren. She was middle-aged, but no wrinkles or whitening hair. She was pretty young looking to me. "Nurse. Oh, nurse. Please change my room. I can't stand this place anymore." I stood there not knowing what to do. I remembered what Norris had told me to say. "Please calm down. What's the problem?" She quivered as her pointer finger pointed at a nearby window. "Oh, over there." Outside, there was nothing scary, just the view of the west building and streetlights. Puzzled, I opened the window and peeked my head outside. "There's nothing here," I called back to her. "I swear to God, there was a thing there." "Huh?" I closed the window behind me. "What thing?" It was like a smashed face of a young woman, and with its rotten voice, it kept calling my name. "Please calm down. It's just your imagination." I put her under the sheets. I calmed her down until she finally started snoozing. I sighed and stood up and made my way out the door. Slowly closing the door behind me, I walked to the back nurse's station and resumed reading my book. Within 5 minutes, the nurse call light was flashing again. Room 207. Again? This time, I navigated myself to Lauren's room without a flashlight. Quickly, I opened the door and saw her shivering in bed. Nurse! It was much worse this time. The moment she calmed down a bit, she shrieked into my face. "It came again! The thing! It's here! Please, I beg you, just move me to another room already." "Ma'am, it's just your imagination. This often happens in hospitals after the shock of getting an injury. It's all right." She shook her head. "It was clear. I saw it. The smashed up face, and that woman kept calling on me. It kept saying, 'Come here, come here, come here.' But I swear to God, if I ever get tricked by that monster, I'll get killed by it." "Ma'am, Please calm down. It's all right. I'll get you some medicine so you can go to sleep. When she was dozing off, I quickly left the room, but once I was in the nurse's station, I stayed cautious in case Lauren wanted to call me again. She did. Ma'am, how many times do I have to tell you? I was cut off by her shrieks. It came again. Do not tell me it was my imagination. It was here. It was luring me. That thing. Just move me to another room, please. Ma'am, it's okay. Let me go check for you. I opened the window and looked around. Close the window, quick! I slammed it shut. I glared at Lauren. What is it now? You almost let it in. It tried to put its foot in. Can't you see it? I had no patience left. I gave her lots of medicine, and almost instantly she was out. I slammed the door shut behind me, and as I was slowly walking down the dark hallway, Lauren screamed, loud and clear. I ran back to the door and saw Lauren crouched beside it. Why are you out of your bed? You're not supposed to be in that hallway at night. I woke up when you slammed the door, and it was right there inside the bed, right in front of me, staring at me. Kept on repeating those damned words. Let me check, okay? I reached for the doorknob, but before I could turn it, a hand reached out and grabbed my wrist. I trapped the thing in there. Don't let it out. I finally realized that this woman was probably mentally disturbed. She was actually seeing these things in her mind, and I could do nothing to stop it. There was only one solution. Lauren, how about this? I'll take you to the nurse's lounge, and you can sleep there until we move you to another available room. How's that sound? She nodded. I helped her up, and we slowly walked back to the lounge where I laid her down on a bench. Wait here. I'll get the head nurse. I called Norris. When she came, I explained the whole thing. Yes, and it was Lauren in room 207. What are you talking about? Lauren Prieto in room 207? You know, the one who has a little mental disorder? Norris wasn't answering. Finally, she talked. Where's she now? I took her into the nurse's lounge without a word. However, where I had left Lauren, she had disappeared. What? Norris stared at me with scared eyes. Nothing that you would expect from a mean lady like her. Follow me. I slowly followed her to the basement, where many passed away patients were stored for research on unknown diseases. I felt a little dizzy standing here at 3 a.m. Maybe a ghost would appear. Norris led me to the very end of the room. There was a small bed labeled P. Do I have a look? She nodded. I peeked under the covers, hiding the limp body. It was Lauren. Astonished, I looked back at Norris. But how? I was talking to her about 30 minutes ago. She was alive. This lady? She passed away yesterday. I stared back at her. She wasn't looking at me. I couldn't argue. I suddenly remembered the monster that Lauren was complaining about. There was a bed labeled B next to Lauren's. Can I take a peek at that one too? Norris wasn't responding, so I did it without her permission. When I looked at the head, I nearly fainted. It was a smashed up face of a woman. 8 years from that incident, when anyone mentions hospitals, I always get that smashed up face in my head, and it never goes away.
So, depending on how much you actually use the internet, you might know of something called the deep web. Pretty much, you can use a proxy service like Tor or I2P and find all kinds of stuff you wouldn't normally find, like places to buy guns or drugs, etc. Anyways, I was browsing an Ask Reddit thread about weird stuff on the internet, and a few people mentioned onion sites. Interested by all this, I decided to download Tor and look up a list of sites to visit. I found one site advertised as a black market. I thought it was pretty cool, so I decided to browse around. People were selling meth, guns, hits on other people, and stolen goods. I was about to leave, but then a post titled "Free for You" caught my eye. I clicked on the thread, and all the post said was "lots of fun for you, free download, enjoy." Below the text was a link to a file called fun.zip. Now, keep in mind, it was like 2 AM and I was really bored. So I downloaded the file and ran it through a few virus scans. Nothing came up, so I decided to unarchive it. Inside were a lot of videos and pictures. I decided to click on one called banaman.avi. I gave it a watch. There wasn't really too much to it. There was just some guy in a banana suit for 4 minutes. I was interested enough to keep on going, so I clicked on a picture called steven.jpg. It was just some guy sitting at his computer looking bored. I opened a few more pictures with people's names on them, and they were almost all the same. Just someone sitting at their computer, looking bored or doing something like carrying books or walking into a store. To be honest, I was getting kinda creeped out, but I decided to press on. I watched a couple more videos. One was some kids walking into school. Another was a man reading the newspaper on his couch. I'll skip to the more interesting ones now. Goodnight.avi. 2 boys, maybe like 7 or 8, are brushing their teeth in their pajamas. They seem completely unaware of the camera, as it is filmed from right beside them. They finish brushing and rush off to bed. For the next 9 hours, it views them sleeping. Nothing else. Payment.avi. A middle-aged man is walking down a dimly lit street during the middle of the night. Again, this person is also completely unaware of the camera. He comes across a teenage girl and begins talking to her. The sound is muffled, but it must be bad due to the growing look of terror on the girl's face. She tries running but gets shoved into the wall by the man. He grabs her phone and backpack and runs off. The video goes on for 4 minutes of the girl sobbing in the street, and then it ends. Stolen.avi. A teenage couple is seen watching a football game at what is presumably their high school. The game ends and the crowd leaves except for the couple, who decide to remain at the bleachers. Once everyone leaves, the couple kisses a few times, and then the boyfriend whispers something into the girl's ear. She keeps saying no, but he keeps on saying come on, and it will be fun, all of my friends have done it with their girlfriends. The girl tries to leave but is grabbed by the boy. At this point, everyone that was at the game has left, and the field is mostly dark. The girl's boyfriend slams her against the back of the bleachers and takes off her pants. He begins sexually assaulting her for 15 minutes. The girl has a black and bloody nose and is sobbing on the ground. Her boyfriend continues beating her until her head is completely stomped in. He puts her body in a trash can behind the bleachers, puts on his PE uniform, and walks away. The camera points at the trash can for 15 minutes, and then the video ends. At this point, I was completely freaked the fuck out. I deleted the archive and decided to go to sleep. I fell asleep almost instantly, but didn't have any dreams at all. I went to school and didn't tell anyone what I had seen. Lots of people asked me why I looked so freaked out. I just said I was kind of on edge because I didn't sleep a lot last night. I was beginning to think that I just had a nightmare, and was taking things way too seriously. After lunch, however, I felt my phone vibrate. It was a text from a number listed as unknown, saying, "You like?" I tried to call, but I just got a busy signal. I figured it was just a wrong number and didn't let it bother me. Things were pretty normal for a few days until Thursday came around. I got another text from unknown, except this time it was a picture. It was a picture of me in my 3rd hour class. I instantly freaked out and went on a computer to try and find the post I saw Sunday night. I looked everywhere, but the thread was nowhere to be found, and no one was talking about it. More pictures started rolling in. Some were of me, others were of my friends, family, and some people I didn't even know. I went to the police and they said that they would try to trace the number, but they considered it low priority, so it would take a couple of days. I texted all my friends asking if they were playing some kind of fucked up joke on me. No answer. I tried calling them and it just went straight to voicemail. I decided I would go home and look into my browser history to find the post, so I called my mom. Again, just went straight to voicemail. Even though I live pretty far from the police station, I decided to run home like my life depended on it. I got home and turned on my computer and saw one file, morefun.zip. With great fear, I opened up the file, and inside were pictures and videos of all of my friends and family being tortured and mutilated. Images of my mom and my friends, and terrible things had been done to them, including videos of them being burned alive. I was just about to call the police, but one more image caught my eye. It was entitled hello.jpg, created about 15 seconds ago. I opened it. It was me, looking at the images, while a man with blood-splattered clothing stood right behind me with a camera, smiling. It was nearly August. I had been accepted to the only school my parents made me apply to. Class was starting in just about 3 weeks and I wasn't even sure if I was going to go in yet. Despite my hesitance, on August 21st, after a long talk with my parents and some soul searching by the Pacific, I decided it was the smartest choice for my life. Due to the fact that I arrived so late, it was extremely difficult to find housing. There was no student housing left, so I was forced to find a place off campus. It seemed like a godsend when I found a 2-bedroom townhouse close to campus with a girl named Jay. I wasn't absolutely thrilled to be living with a random roommate after hearing so many roommate horror stories, and I wondered why she had no friends of her own to live with. So I was relieved to discover that she was simply new to the town as well. She was nice and usually kept to herself. We had different schedules. She worked nights and I had class all day, so it wasn't uncommon to not even see each other for long periods of time. She actually seemed totally normal. I settled in over the next few months, and between classes, making new friends and working part-time, I didn't even realize that I hadn't seen Jay in about 2 days. She kept her door shut a lot, so I decided to knock and check on her. I knocked twice and didn't get a response. "Jay?" I asked after about 3 seconds. Another few seconds passed and I still didn't hear anything, so I peeked my head into the door to see if she was okay. Perfume was grotesquely strong in the air, like she had doused the room. I saw her lying in bed, under her comforter, facing away from me, but I could see her silky black hair. "Oh hi, sorry, I'm not feeling well," she croaked almost unrecognizably. I've totally lost my voice. I had felt bad for intruding, so I ducked out of there after quickly apologizing for waking her up. I did some laundry and met some friends for dinner. I came back around 9 p.m. and did some homework in my room. The perfume smell was starting to mix with something kind of bad. I opened the window to air it out and put it out of my mind. I woke up in the middle of the night to Jay's creaky, high-pitched giggling. It frankly sounded demented because of her hoarse throat. The sporadic eruptions of giggling continued and made it hard to fall back asleep, but I figured she was just redditing or something. Plus she was sick and I'm not really a confrontational person. Eventually I could clearly hear her rewinding then replaying the same 5 minutes of The Goonies. It was the part where the kids find Sloth. I finally fell asleep to weird Goonies-inspired dreams. I woke up late to my alarm clock and had to rush out of the house, but the perfumey, nasty smell at this point was almost overpowering. I knocked on the door again, and yet again there was no answer. I tried to peek my head inside, but this time it was locked. "Oh, don't come in right now, I'm changing," she wheezed out. "Jay, it smells horrible in here. Do you know what that is?" No, I'm so sick, I can't smell anything." "Okay, well, I'll figure it out when I get home." I had no time to deal with it. I would have to look around the house. Maybe we had an animal problem or some food had fallen behind somewhere in the kitchen. The day went by as normal. I talked to a professor about possibly becoming a teacher's assistant, met some friends from class for lunch, and headed home to lie around the house for the rest of the day. In fact, the day felt so average that it was hard to process what I was seeing when I came home to a townhouse surrounded by police cars and ambulances. What was going on? There was even caution tape like in the movies, and a news van. I walked my way up to a police officer, explaining that it was my house, asking what the deal was. "Ma'am, wait right here a second," he said, as he called for a detective on his radio. A detective walked down the steps and pulled me aside to talk. Again, I explained that I lived here, and he asked me how long it had been since I had been home. I told him I was home just this morning, and asked him why. He told me that Jay's parents had been unable to contact her for the past few days, and that they had called the police today to look for her. When they came over, the door was unlocked and they went inside to look for her. They found her body. Jay had been murdered. I was unable to process what I was hearing. "What do you mean? How could this happen? In the middle of the day? I just talked to her this morning." The officer's next words are something I hear every single time I turn the lights off at night. "This morning, miss? That's impossible. Jay's been dead for at least 3 days." This was extremely hard to write, due to constant anxiety, PTSD, etc. However, it kinda helped to get it out to somebody besides a gruff cop who thought I might have done something. Because, understandably I guess, it's hard to imagine that I did not realize that a man was living in Jay's room for 3 days after torturing, strangling, and then eventually mutilating her.
This happened on Halloween 4 years ago. I was sitting on the sofa in my apartment relaxing with my laptop, waiting for kids to come knock on my door as I usually did. Being too old to trick or treat, but not a fan of parties. However, this year, I had just moved to a new apartment, which was farther away from the larger homes I lived near before, and fewer kids seemed to be in the area. One of the reasons was that it was an apartment complex for single guys, and was far enough from my college that people who lived here had to drive to school. Still, I had a small bucket of candy prepared, as usual, which I had been snacking from. The apartments on both sides of me are usually quiet. Nobody lives in the apartment above mine. So far, the evening was just hours of silence and occasional music from my laptop. It was 7 o'clock and still not a single person had stopped by for candy. I suddenly realized that I might have left my outside light off. I wasn't used to my apartment yet, so I opened the door and looked outside to check. It was off. No wonder nobody had stopped by. I flipped the switch on and looked back outside to see if people were there. I couldn't see anyone walking around, but it was dark and the complex was large, so I didn't think much of it. I closed the door and started walking back towards the sofa. That was fast, I thought. I walked back to my sofa, stopped the music on my laptop, and picked up the bowl of candy. When I walked back to the open door, a young dark-skinned boy, probably about 10 years old at most, stood there by himself, with what looked like white flowers sprinkled all over the top of his head. He was wearing a SpongeBob shirt, and it didn't seem to be a costume, nor dressed unusually, except for the white flower that was on his short hair and forehead. He didn't say trick or treat, but he looked up at me and seemed irritated for some reason. "Can I use your bathroom?" His voice was monotone, almost like he was trying to fake a robot voice. I smiled, a bit shocked that my first visitor was this kid, and he didn't even want any candy. "Sure, but be quick." He ran inside past me and closed the bathroom door, locking it behind him. I decided to keep the front door open and stand next to it while I waited for him to finish, holding the bowl of candy while looking to see if anyone else was coming toward my apartment. 10 minutes later and nobody came by, and the boy was still in my bathroom. "Are you okay?" There wasn't an answer, but I could hear him walking around behind the door. The water faucet turned on a tiny bit. It was just streaming softly. I waited by the door. 2 minutes later, and the water was still running. My front door was open, and it was dark outside, except for the glow from my porch light. Can you come out for a second?" I started to worry if the boy was alright, or if he was playing some kind of prank. After all, it was Halloween. I'm opening the door. I knew it was locked, but I tried wiggling the handle to see if it would budge. The water was running, but I couldn't hear anything else from behind the door. Can you open the door? I need to use the bathroom, I said, using that as an excuse. I was starting to panic a little inside. Maybe he was hurt. There was still no answer. Now I was really starting to get worried. I ran my shoulder into the door once, wondering if what I see people do in crime dramas really works or not. It really hurt. I tried it again and again. Then I tried kicking the door. At this point, I'm starting to freak out. The bathroom doesn't have a key, so there was no way to open it. I'm calling the police. Actually, I was worried if the police would even show up in a reasonable amount of time on Halloween. I called them anyway, and they said they were in the neighborhood and could be right over. While they drove over, I explained on the phone what was going on. When they arrived, I ran outside and unlocked the complex gate, then followed them back to my apartment. The two officers arrived. They heard the water running and then started kicking at the door. One of them had a crowbar but didn't need to use it. My cheap wooden bathroom door was open in a few solid kicks. It shot open, spraying paint dust and wood chips everywhere. Then I saw both of the officers pull out their radios at the same time and enter the bathroom. I ran up behind them to see what happened, but the officers' figures were blocking the view. "Oh boy," I heard one of them say. Now I was freaking out, and I couldn't talk. I was already uncomfortable in my new apartment. I didn't want to have a memory of finding a dead boy in my bathroom. Both officers were shuffling around in the bathroom. Then they stepped out and put their radios away. They looked at me sternly, and then one of them sighed. "I'm not sure what to say. I'm going to let you off with a warning because it's Halloween." My mind was filled with nothing but confusion and fear. I couldn't even look back at the officers after seeing their expressions. "I'll have one of our guys give you a call tomorrow to discuss this. For now, don't call us up anymore tonight." And then they walked out of the front door. One of them turned back to look at me, and then left the door open. In my panic, I ran into the bathroom. The floor was covered with tiny white wood chips from the door. The faucet was off. I didn't even realize the officers had turned it off. Nothing was there. Nothing else was touched. The next morning, I got a call from a woman. I was certain when I answered the phone that I was going to be in trouble, but what followed shocked me. "I was going to call you in regards to a prank phone call this morning, but after reading the report the police gave me, I'm not too surprised this happened in the first place," was what I heard. "This is the apartment manager, by the way. We had the same call from someone in that apartment 5 years ago for a similar thing. Maybe you can ask the police for more details, but simply put, when we used to be family housing, a boy died in that bathroom 7 years ago. They say he drowned in a bathtub." I couldn't say anything. "Happened 7 years ago, and after they left, the next residents called the police a couple of years later, saying that they heard a boy locked in their bathroom and wanted us to come help. When we got there, it was empty." "So it was a ghost?" was all I could ask. "I'm not saying anything. I don't know about all that. I'm just saying that this is not the first time. But the whole bathroom has been remodeled since then. It was a long time ago." The call continued and we talked about some other things, mostly unrelated to the event of the previous night. I hung up the phone and was feeling a bit shaken. Nothing else happened that day. I decided I'd better call someone to fix the door. The apartment manager told me that she would pay for it, then jokingly told me not to let any kids use it. I tried as hard as I could to smile over the phone. The next day, the repair company came by. They called me on my cell phone, and I jogged outside to let them in. Right then, it felt like my insides were hit with a rock. I suddenly remembered that my apartment complex has a gate. Nobody without a key could enter. It's no wonder that there were no people trick-or-treating at my apartment complex. It was a singles apartment. No kids lived there, and no kids could have entered.
If there are any Skyrim players on here, beware of a place called Husfertap Manor. It exists just outside of the playable area in the southwestern-most end of the map, directly south of Markarth. You'll see it on the edge of a mountain as what appears to be a clearing with a rectangular white structure at one end. I found it one day while playing around with the console commands on the game. See, I was bored and decided to explore beyond the playable boundary of the game, as developers tend to leave some interesting Easter eggs or unfinished concepts in the great beyond. So I used a command allowing myself to clip through the invisible wall that prevents you from leaving the map and explored around a bit. For the first hour or so, I didn't really see much besides empty forest and mountain ranges. I did come across a model for what looked like an early concept for the Falmer, and one of the developers apparently carved his initials into the side of the mountain. But that was about it. Finally, while approaching the southwest mountain range, I thought I saw what looked like a structure on the other side. My curiosity sparked. I clambered up the mountain with surprising ease and landed in a large grassy yard in front of an enormous white mansion. In front of the mansion was a simple wooden sign that read Husfertap Manor. The mansion itself was surprisingly low res for a game this recent and lacked a lot of graphical detail aside from two large rectangular windows on either side of the door, and 4 featureless columns lining the porch. The lawn was also very rudimentary, lacking any sort of decoration or graphical texture and existing instead as little more than a wide sea of green. This must have been a planned location that was abandoned early on in development. I entered the mansion, which turned out to be nothing more than a bare frame on the inside. No furniture, lamps, or trophy heads were present to decorate the wood walls. The only decoration this place had was a small podium on the very back wall with a featureless black book resting on it. I approached the book and pressed the prompt to read it, which oddly didn't give the title, it just said read. Though disappointingly the page was completely blank except for a number 1 in the upper left corner. Placing the book down, I turned to leave and was unexpectedly greeted by an NPC I hadn't seen on the way in. It was a young woman, apparently a Nord, with jet black hair and wearing a long blue gown. She sort of looked like Lydia, but thinner and with longer hair. The woman stood in the center of the mansion, just staring at me and turning her head to follow as I walked around her. As I walked up to her, she said bluntly, "Wealth is temporary. What is here today will be gone tomorrow." I wasn't sure exactly what this meant. Maybe some unrealized quest involving retrieving this woman's stolen gold? I determined there was no more to see here and left the mansion. This was certainly an interesting find. An entire location and character forgotten in the code of the game, and I had just uncovered them. And speaking of the character, I intended at some point to find that woman's code so I could bring her into the main game and make her marryable. I mean, she was kinda hot. Unfortunately, this high point will be overwritten by a horrible next day. On the way home from work, someone came up behind me, knocked me over, grabbed the wallet out of my pocket and ran off. I didn't see their face, only that they were wearing jeans and a black hoodie. That really was not a tremendous help to the police, who said they'd try to find the suspect, but without an actual physical description, it would be difficult. Well, this sucked. Even though I can call and cancel my credit card, I had about $80 in that wallet, and I'm damn near broke as it is. For some reason, I couldn't help but recall what the woman said in Skyrim. Wealth is temporary. What is here today will be gone tomorrow. I knew it sounded silly, but I couldn't shake that phrase from my mind. Maybe there was a connection. I ultimately dismissed this thought as ridiculous. After all, whoever heard of a magic fortune-telling video game? However, I did need some cheering up after this. I fired up Skyrim and decided to return to Husfertap, as last time I neglected to find out the mysterious woman's name, which would be helpful if I'm going to hack her code and marry her. After journeying back to that end of the map, I climbed back over the mountain and reached the mansion. Something was different about it though. The bright white that had cloaked the mansion yesterday had now faded into an almost dirty white, and the windows were coated in a thin layer of dust, making the view inside slightly translucent. I approached anyway and stepped inside. To my surprise, the woman had seemingly undergone a change as well. She was a few inches taller. Her hair was also a lighter shade than before, and she had more noticeable frown lines. It was almost as if she had aged to some degree. Not drastically, but she definitely wasn't the hot young 20-something I ran into yesterday. The woman's deep blue gown also looked a bit faded, as though it had too aged. As I approached, I noticed that the prompt to talk to her never appeared, making it impossible to know the woman's name. When I looked to face her, she offered me a faint smile coupled with a slight sigh, almost like she was faking being happy to see me. A man works hard for his coin, she said suddenly, but when he ceases to be useful, he is cast away to starve. Great, another cryptic message from an unmarriable NCP of unknown name in a bare house with nothing but a useless book. Disappointed, I left Husfertap Manor for what I intended to be the last time. It was a neat find, but really there wasn't anything of real value here. The next day, I was hit with another whammy. As I came into work at the corner gas station, my boss pulled me into his office and told me that the place had gone over budget and he had to let go a few of us. And sadly, a certain someone was among these few. I tried to explain my financial state, as well as the little incident yesterday with my wallet, but my boss merely apologized and said that there was nothing he could do, that he simply didn't have enough money to pay me. Whatever, that was a crap job anyway. As I walked home, a thought came to me. Besides my hatred for my boss, that is. This was twice that the woman in the blue had predicted my fate. The other day, she said something about the loss of wealth right before I get mugged. Then just now, she mentions workers being cast away. And here I am, unemployed the next day. I know I should just dismiss this thought as silly, but what if the mysterious woman was predicting my future? That night, I decided to show the Easter egg to one of my friends, who had also been trying to explore the outer fringes of Skyrim with no luck. I had explained to him all the weird things that had happened, including being mugged, losing my job, and the cryptic messages that predicted both. Dude, that is so weird, my friend said when I told him what happened, though I wasn't sure if he fully believed me yet. I know, I replied. I'm kind of afraid to go back, but, maybe I can use this as a heads up from now on. So I started up the game and returned to the mansion, which was now in an even worse shape than yesterday. It looked like the white paint was actually starting to peel off, revealing a stony grey undercoat. Tiny cracks were also beginning to form here and there, if nothing else giving the mansion some text and personality, although it was an unpleasant one. When I entered, I saw that the woman had aged again. This time her hair was beginning to grey, and she had noticeable wrinkles on her face. She looked like she was about in her 50s this time. Her dress was also beginning to tatter and lose its colour. I thought you said she was a young woman, my friend said. She was last time. She ages every time you visit the house. My friend was confused by this, and with good reason, seeing as how NPCs in this game don't age. As I approached, the woman exhaled and her face looked almost sad. Your home is your sanctuary, and you do all you can to preserve it. But what happens when others aren't as responsible? Her tone in this sentence sounded very sad. Did you hear that? I asked my friend in an alarmed tone. I didn't hear anything, dude, he said. When she opened her mouth, all I heard was static. I packed up my computer in a hurry, ran out the door as fast as I could, and tore down the street towards my apartment. Maybe I could get home in time to stop whatever was going to happen. Just because the game predicted it doesn't mean it's going to happen right away. There still might be time, I thought to myself. There still might be time. I didn't need to get close to see the flames. What used to be my apartment building was now a glowing orange inferno. Firemen were already at the scene, attempting to quell the fire, but it wouldn't be enough to salvage my burning home. Speechless, I could do nothing but look on in despair at my room, crumbling and falling into pieces before my eyes. I'm going to have to ask you to stand back, sir, one of the firemen ordered me. What the hell happened? I cried. One of the residents left their stove on and gas spread into the air. We think that they went to light a cigarette and the entire room went up in flames. Did you live here? I nodded, and the fireman apologized and offered his condolences. I didn't know what to think. On the one hand, I was glad I wasn't inside the apartment. Thanks to my discovery of this Easter egg, however, I had just lost everything I owned in that fire, all except my laptop and this copy of Skyrim. Luckily, my friend let me stay at his place for a while, so at least I had a roof over my head. For the next week or so, I focused on trying to find another job so I could rent a new apartment room. Yet I was having no luck whatsoever. I told my girlfriend, Susan, the whole situation, from the mugging, to me getting fired, to my apartment burning down. However, I did leave out the part about the Skyrim fortune teller, as she is neither a gamer nor superstitious. Susan was overcome with sympathy towards my situation and offered to talk to her boss to see if I could get a job where she works. She really is one of a kind, I thought to myself. Of course, I still put out what must have been 8 job applications that day, just to be safe. Afterwards, I was mentally exhausted and ready to get lost in my video game once again. I decided not to visit Husfertap this time though. I just needed a normal session of escapist fantasy to relax my mind. All was going well for a bit. I took on a few random quests, raided a bandit camp, and brought down a few bears. Then, mysteriously, a courier approached me in the forest. He did his usual bit about having a letter from my hands only, and then handed me a note called Skyrim Note 367.esp. This was made especially bizarre by the fact that I was in the wilderness when this happened, and typically couriers only hand you messages in cities. Regardless, I decided to read the odd note. I pulled up my inventory, opened the note, and saw that it only had one sentence. Do not come back. This had to have come from the woman in blue, and I understood why. Each visit causes her to age, and we both knew that eventually she would be aged to death. But that as it may, this woman had a gift that could mean the difference between life or death for me. If her predictions could help me prevent possible disaster, I needed to know them regardless of the consequences to her. The needs of a flesh and blood human being are above those of an artificial intelligence. I was definitely going back to the manor. I decided to immediately head for Husfertap after all. Reaching the edge of the map, I entered the console command and scaled the out-of-bounds mountain until I reached the mansion, which was now almost completely dilapidated. One of the support columns had actually fallen over, littering the front porch with rubble. The windows had all been busted out, revealing an interior that was dusty and riddled with cracks. The exterior of the house was also checkered with spiderwebs, their inhabitants eyeing me cautiously. The woman inside had, as usual, aged along with the house, but a bit more drastically this time. Her hair had turned completely white, her face was heavily wrinkled, and she was beginning to hunch over. She looked like she was in her late 60s or early 70s. Her blue gown had now faded into more of a bluish grey, and was littered with rips and tears. As soon as she saw me, the woman outstretched her hands in protest and shook her head, her face conveying a look of both fear and desperation. However, she did not back away or run, as though she was fixed in that one spot in the middle of the room. I approached the woman in defiance of her protests, causing her to lower her arms and hang her head in defeat. Love is a powerful feeling, the woman choked out, her eyes glassy, as though she was about to cry. But it is so fragile in this chaotic world, which shows no mercy to even the closest of lovers. My heart dropped. The person I loved more than anyone in the world was Susan. We'd been going out for 3 years and were practically perfect for each other. If anything had happened to her, it would destroy me. I slammed my laptop shut, grabbed the keys to my friend's car, who luckily was asleep, and floored it to Susan's house. During my drive, I could only pray that I would get to her in time. I had waited several days to return to Husfertap. What if I already found out too late? Arriving at my girlfriend's house, I could see through the window. Her kitchen light was on. Good, I thought. At least she was home. I approached the door and pounded on it several times. No answer. "Susan, are you there?" I called, my voice shaky from sheer terror. After a few seconds, I knocked again, my strikes louder and more frantic this time. "Susan, please open the door," I called again, pounding furiously, to which there was no response. I was mortified now. Unable to wait another second, I rammed the door as hard as I could with my shoulder. Once, and then a second time. Finally, I charged full force at the door, causing it to give way. I hurried to the kitchen only to find that my worst fear had come true. I was too late. The love of my life lay motionless on the kitchen floor, her mouth dripping foam and her head lying in a puddle of blood. I knew Susan was an epileptic. She clearly had an episode and hit her head on the kitchen table. I literally felt my soul shatter into a million pieces. Not able to remove my gaze from the dead body of my girlfriend, I staggered forward and fell to my knees. If I had been here just a few minutes earlier, she may still be alive. I lifted Susan's head out of the puddle of blood and held her to my chest, sobbing uncontrollably. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than for her to reach out and hug me back. In a way, I died that night as well. Nearly a week had passed since my girlfriend's death, yet that horrible night still burned fresh in my mind. Why wasn't I quick enough? Why hadn't I gone to receive the woman's prediction earlier? I just couldn't bear the guilt any longer. No matter which way you look at it, Susan's death was my fault. Or was it? I mean, that fortune teller had to have known for some time that this would happen. Yet she'd waste all that valuable time with far more trivial predictions. I could have lived another day without the $80 stolen from me. Or that crap job of mine. Hell, even my apartment could have been replaced. But Susan was my love, my soulmate. I had plans to marry her one day. Yet this woman, she chose to tell me all the least important fortunes first, knowing that would eventually happen. Had she revealed Susan's fate from the get-go, or even informed me in her note, I could have saved my girlfriend. This was all her fault. Hastily booting up my laptop, I could see nothing but red.
I was going to kill her. I was going to bust down that mansion door and break her old body with the strongest weapon my character had. When the game loaded, I was at the very far end of the map, as far away from Husfertap as I could be. Plant me wherever you want on the map, bitch. It won't save you. I barreled through the land faster than I thought my character could, mowing down any unlucky AI enemy that crossed my path. Nothing was going to get in my way. My mind was fixated. I could think of nothing more than avenging my girlfriend's death. The forests and holds of Skyrim flew past my vision in a blur of colour. I literally stopped for nothing. At last I reached the mansion, which had completely collapsed into a pile of unrecognizable rubble. I equipped my warhammer. I was just itching to bash the old woman's brains in. I ducked under the fallen beams and clambered over the piles of collapsed marble to find the woman in her usual position in the center of where the building would be. This time, she was older than I'd ever seen a human being. She was hunched and trembling, looking like she was hardly able to stand up. Her arms looked more like skin stretched over bones. Her hair was nothing more than thin wisps of white, and her gown existed simply as ragged strips draped over her crippled form. To be honest, the woman looked barely alive at all. In this moment, my rage and hatred gave way to almost pity. Her advanced age was clearly putting her in a great deal of pain. I put away my hammer and just stood there, at a loss for what to do. "You came back?" The old woman breathed in what was little more than a loud whisper. "Why did you come back? Why couldn't you just stay away?" I could tell she was sad, but simply too exhausted to convey it. At this time, a moment of clarity came over me. I fully understood for the first time that this woman was not a simple mindless AI acting out programming, but rather a living and thinking being who existed within the game. I didn't know where she came from or who put her there, but there she was nevertheless. "What are you talking about?" I caught myself asking out loud. The woman, almost as if she had heard me, raised a trembling arm to point to the book at the back end of the mansion. I was confused. The last time I looked at that book, it was blank except for a single number. What could be different now? Still, I found myself overcome by curiosity and opened the odd book once more. To my surprise, the contents of the book had completely changed. Rather than one simple number, there were now the numbers 1 through 5 running down the page, each with a different symbol by it. The first symbol was that of Skyrim's Thieves Guild. The second was a silhouette of a beggar. The third was a burning house. The fourth of a broken heart. And the fifth entry, blank. Wait, if this place knew my future, why was the final entry blank? Then a final realization hit me. What if the woman in blue wasn't predicting my future after all? What if my visits here were actually causing all those things to happen? They did seem to happen very shortly after speaking to the woman in blue. Yes, it all made sense. The woman wasn't at fault. She was simply the messenger of whatever was responsible for the atrocities plaguing me. Yet I had to hear her message for them to take effect. That's why she never wanted me to return here. She knew that my visits would eventually lead to Susan's death and tried to stop me, but I just wouldn't listen. Now my girlfriend was dead, and my life was in shambles because of my arrogance and stupidity. Shaken, I closed the book and turned to leave, only to see a horrifying sight. The woman was dead, and her body was completely decayed. She honestly looked like a Draugr with the now grey rags thrown over it. Clutched in her skeletal hand was a small note, which I dared not read, for I knew what it would say. This manor had taken everything from me, and now there was only one thing left it could take. Terrified, and still furious, I switched my computer off, ripped out the game disc, and tossed it in the trash, ensuring the manor's final curse went undelivered. Nearly a month has passed since I threw the game away. I'm still completely broke, and still without a job. My friend's sense of charity is gone, and he kicked me out, and I have no family who can take me in. So now I am completely alone. The only possessions I have are the clothes on my back and my laptop, which I intend to sell after I type this so that I can finally get some fresh food for once. I still have no explanation for what happened to me, or where Husfertap Manor came from in the first place. All I know is that there are forces in this world we can't even begin to understand, and when tampered with, they will destroy us. I had to learn this lesson the hard way, and I hope that none of you make the same mistakes I did. If you happen across that mansion in your game, do not enter it, and do not speak to the woman in blue. As for me, though I will always revile that place for what it did to me, every night when I go to sleep, I toy with the idea of going to the landfill and finding that copy of Skyrim. so that I can return to Husfertap Manor and receive its last message. After everything Husfertap has taken from me, maybe now it could finally give me something. Peace. When was the last time you went to the theater? The last time I went was the year 2003 on Halloween night. Yeah, I know, it's very cliche, but I am an actor in training and I had realized I hadn't been to a theater to see a proper play yet. The only ones I had ever been to are the ones which I've had to go see with my college, or if I was actually in them. The play was called Don't Watch and was about a retired puppeteer, but that's all I really remember about the story. It was a Halloween special, so I figured it would be a horror genre. My friends and I got there early to grab the best seats as I was overly excited about my first theater experience as an audience member. And of course I wanted to get one of the good seats. We took our seats in the front row, but there was a blank piece of paper on my seat, so I just took it off and sat there. We waited a good 15 minutes until the rest of the guests had started to arrive. A slow piano tune started to play as the audience took their seats. As everyone was seated, a loud scuffling sound came out of the speakers, as if someone was messing around with a microphone. The announcer started to speak with a creepy tone to his voice. It kind of sent chills down my spine. Make sure all mobile devices are turned off and please, no camera or recordings allowed during the performance for copyright purposes, and it also may put off the actor. Now sit back and enjoy the show. I noticed something strange about his announcement. May put off the actor, he said, suggesting this would be a one-man show, and in fact it was looking that way. The piano music stopped playing and the curtain lifted. There stood a pale man wearing a brown suit with a faded blue and white striped loose tie. Circus music began to play and he lifted up a doll-like puppet and started playing with it. I looked at my friends seated on either side of me to confirm that they were just as perplexed as I was, and found that they were all staring at the man in awe. He began to pace backwards and forward from left to right on the stage while still playing with the puppet. The man began to cry and weep, and to be honest I felt a bit uneasy watching it, but I was very intrigued. The man stopped in the middle of the stage after 5 minutes of repeating the pacing and weeping. He dropped the puppet on the floor and walked backstage. He returned immediately with a tall floor mirror and placed it in the middle of the stage, leaning against the backdrop. It was tilted up towards the back of the room. As I squinted to see the mirror, something was strange. I couldn't see the reflection of the back wall. I could just see a stage, as if the image in the mirror is what the audience could see. I was quite impressed. They really made the effects look convincing. At least, I hope there were effects. The man picked up his puppet and began to play with it again. But this time he stood up in front of the mirror and started to weep more loudly. The music changed suddenly back to the original piano tune which had played for a short time before the show began. I shuddered as a wave of uneasiness washed over me. I scanned the audience and saw that the actor had pretty much captivated everyone in the room apart from myself. My attention was on my surroundings. I was actually afraid that someone was going to jump out from behind because of the fact that this man was drawing people's attention to the front of the stage. The man stood in front of a mirror and wept whilst playing with his puppet for a good 10 minutes. And I started to wonder if this was the whole play, but nobody else seemed to be responding to it. I was getting a little bit bored, but definitely frightened. I whispered to my friends, I think I just want to leave, but nobody was paying attention. I started to get a bit frustrated and impatient, so I stood up and was about to get ready to leave. But as I stood up, every single audience member turned their heads and stared at me. Even the man on the stage turned his head. Not his body, but only his head, and looked at me. Obviously, I felt more uneasy and was unable to stand, so I slowly took my seat again and all the heads turned back to the attention of the actor. The man on the stage turned back to the mirror and started his repetitive movements. I looked behind me to find the exit so I could quickly leave without a fuss. I had my route ready, but as I turned back to look at the stage, the actor had gone. So had the backdrop, which was quite strange because the mirror was still there on the stage, standing on its own, but this time it was tilting down. Funny enough, it was facing me and I could see my reflection. I was so scared at this point that I was unable to move. I wanted to run to the exit so badly, but my body just didn't seem to want to budge. I stared into the mirror and something weird happened. I saw the actor in the reflection, and then he disappeared. I scrunched up my eyes and opened them wide again, to see myself staring towards the audience, almost as if I was standing on the stage. I looked behind me and it was pitch black. I looked ahead of me again, and it was like I was looking into the mirror that was on the stage, but I was in it. I was in the mirror looking out to the audience, and I was absolutely terrified. As I stared towards them, I saw myself sitting in the audience just looking up at the stage in awe, just like I saw everyone else when I was sitting in the audience. Then a shadow started to appear, and it was him, the actor. He stood in front of the mirror and started playing with his puppet and weeping again. Just like before, he looked straight into my eyes, and I fainted. I would hate to end the story on it was all just a dream, but I did in fact wake up in my bed. I looked at the calendar and it read 31st of October 2003, and I just froze. There was something written on the date, an event. I thought that has to be the play I had seen called Don't Watch, and of course it did say that, but something wasn't right. I checked my diary and the day before had said dress rehearsal. Nothing really seemed to make sense. I hadn't had any plays recently. It was the holidays. I started to get texts saying break a leg, good luck, and cannot wait to see the show, and I started to feel a bit sick. I drove to the theater and walked into the room where the play was. The stage was exactly as I saw it. No backdrop, and the mirror was standing on its own. I walked down to the front row, and there was the blank piece of paper on my seat. Although it wasn't blank, I turned it over and it said, reserved for the actor.